looks like a shooting gallery. Well, I'll just run home and bring back my 7mm Remington mag.
Please, before he walks by again.
Okay.
Behind the curtain of Hollywood's most beloved fake talk show lurks a world stranger than any script. A loaded gun in a star's dressing room. A psychic who predicted a writer's future career. A real-life firing that mirrored on-screen fiction, then turned into a $1 million lawsuit with FBI wiretaps. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Larry Sanders Show. Fact 1. Howard Stern stole. Hey Now from Hank Kingsley.
Insecurities. I hate the way I look. Like right now, I'm so aware of this camera and I have my glasses off and I look horrible.
One of the most recognizable catchphrases in American radio history actually started life as a running joke on a fictional television talk show. The phrase, "Hey Now," the two-word greeting used by Howard Stern and his listeners for decades, was originally the signature line of Hank Kingsley, the bumbling sidekick on The Larry Sanders Show, played by Jeffrey Tambor. Hank used the phrase constantly throughout the show's run, saying it as a greeting, as a punchline, and as a way to fill awkward silences. It was his thing, the one piece of identity he held onto no matter what. The phrase first appeared formally in Season 1, Episode 13, simply titled, "Hey Now," in which Larry actually tries to get Hank to stop saying it and fails completely. The catchphrase worked because it could mean almost anything. It was a hello, a laugh, a nervous reaction, entirely defined by context and delivery. Jeffrey Tambor made it feel simultaneously pathetic and lovable, which is a genuinely difficult thing to pull off. Howard Stern saw the show soon after that episode aired and immediately loved the phrase. He began using it on his own radio program as a direct homage to Hank Kingsley. And he has said so publicly and openly on multiple occasions, even having Gary Shandling call into his show in 2010 to discuss the origins of the phrase together. Stern's staff and listeners adopted it so thoroughly that Hey Now became its own code within the Stern world, a way fans identified each other. TV Land ranked it as the 87th greatest television catchphrase of all time in 2007. Most people who say it today have no idea it began on an HBO comedy about a fictional talk show that aired in the summer of 1992. Fact 2. Rip Torn showed up to his audition babbling incoherently.
Kept it a big secret. I mean, I knew what the hell would they want me to be an actor for.
Before Rip Torn became one of the most beloved figures in the Larry Sanders Show's 6-year run, he had to audition for the role of Artie, the show's tough and fiercely loyal producer. And his audition, to put it gently, was one of the stranger experiences anyone on the production team had witnessed up to that point. Casting executive Susie Fitzgerald was in the room with Gary Shandling when Torn arrived. She later recalled that Torn walked in wearing an LL Bean hat with a long bill and a fishing jacket. Not exactly the wardrobe of someone who had dressed to impress. He then proceeded to have what Fitzgerald described as a completely nonsensical conversation with Shandling that went on for roughly 20 minutes. Nobody in the room could follow what Torn was talking about, including Shandling himself. When Torn finally left, Fitzgerald turned to Shandling and asked plainly what Torn had been saying. Shandling's answer was equally plain. He had absolutely no idea. They cast him anyway. What is interesting is that Torn would not normally have read for a part at all. He was a veteran stage actor with decades of serious dramatic work behind him, including a Tony Award nomination on Broadway and film roles that ran from Judas Iscariot to Richard Nixon. His agent had made clear that Torn simply did not do auditions in the traditional sense. But somehow he came in. He spoke at length about something nobody understood, and something about the whole experience convinced Shandling that this was precisely the man he needed. That willingness to trust a completely chaotic audition turned out to be one of the best casting decisions in the show's history, and Torn would go on to receive Emmy nominations for all 6 seasons of the series. Fact 3. the character Artie was rewritten to match Torn's own personality.
Woman's a babe.
Oh, for God's sake.
Remember in Partridge Family to see her thigh between that short skirt and the boots?
The character of Artie, the hard-edged, intensely loyal producer at the center of the Larry Sanders Show, was not always the man Rip Torn eventually made him. When Gary Shandling and co-creator Dennis Klein first conceived the role, they had someone very different in mind as the model: Fred DeCordova, the longtime executive producer of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. DeCordova was known in the television industry as a friendly, charming, and professionally polished man who had kept one of the biggest shows in television running smoothly for more than 2 decades. The character of Artie was intended to capture something of that steady, gracious energy. The problem was that Rip Torn found that characterization genuinely difficult to work with. Torn's own real-life personality was not gracious or smooth in that particular way. He was intense, confrontational, often volatile, and utterly uninterested in pretense or social politeness. The further Artie drifted toward friendliness and warmth, the harder Torn found it to locate the character. Shandling and the writing team made a practical decision. Rather than keep pushing Torn toward a version of the character that felt unnatural to him, they pivoted. Artie became far more grounded in Torn's own personality, blunt, ferocious, deeply loyal, but openly menacing to anyone who threatened the show or the people he cared about. Fred DeCordova was still an influence on the role, and the real DeCordova was reportedly so pleased with the fictional version of himself that he signed a copy of his memoir and gave it to Torn with the inscription, "To the other Fred." The reworked Artie turned out to be the emotional backbone of the entire series, which would likely have been a very different show had Torn been asked to keep playing a nice man. Fact 4. Rip Torn once brought a gun to his dressing room.
I think that what Larry's trying to say is that we have no real problem with the live commercial concept.
Rip Torn's reputation for intensity was well known long before he joined the Larry Sanders Show. Stories about his confrontations, most famously an incident involving writer Norman Mailer and a hammer, had circulated in Hollywood for years. When Torn was first suggested as a possible cast member for the show, the initial reaction from people in the industry was reportedly that it simply could not be done. He was too volatile, too unpredictable. You could not build a television production around him. Gary Shandling called him in anyway, and for most of the show's run, Torn was, by many accounts, exactly the kind, generous, and supportive colleague nobody expected him to be. But not always. As the show gained critical acclaim and more celebrity guests began appearing, episodes grew more complex and lines sometimes had to be cut. Torn, who came from a background in serious film and theater work, was not accustomed to having his material trimmed at the last minute for a television schedule. He took it personally, and on at least one occasion, the tension reached a genuinely alarming level. During a taping that featured country singer Clint Black, Torn's lines kept getting reduced as the crew worked around Black's musical performances. One day, an assistant director walked into the writer's room and informed Gary Shandling that Torn was smashing things in his dressing room and had a gun. According to co-star Linda Doucette, who later told the story publicly, Shandling paused for a moment and then said plainly, "Send Linda in, he won't shoot her. We've got a show to tape." Doucette knocked on the door. Torn greeted her warmly. She talked him down, and the production continued. After that incident, she effectively became Torn's unofficial on-set negotiator for the remainder of her time on the show. Fact 5. The cameraman shot hallway scenes on roller skates.
You could say hello.
I don't do the wing-ding thing.
You know, a quick hello. Maybe a few words about your old buddy.
Television viewers who watched The Larry Sanders Show in the 1990s might not have stopped to ask how the show managed to create those long, smooth, flowing shots of characters walking and talking through the narrow hallways behind the fictional talk show's stage. The answer was genuinely unusual and it had nothing to do with expensive equipment. It had to do with a cinematographer who happened to be a skilled hockey player and a production that simply could not afford a better solution. The show's director of photography was Peter Smokler, and when the production needed fluid tracking shots for the backstage scenes, the budget did not allow for a Steadicam rig, which at the time was the standard professional tool for that kind of work. Instead, Smokler put on rollerblades and shot the scenes himself, backpedaling down the hallways while actors walked toward and past him. Show director Todd Holland later confirmed that the low budget was the direct reason, and that Smokler's background as a hockey player meant he had the balance and coordination to make the technique actually work. What started as a necessity eventually became something far more sophisticated. Smokler became so skilled at moving on rollerblades through the cramped hallways that the crew began attempting compound shots, chasing an actor down a corridor and then reversing direction smoothly mid-shot as the actor turned back. These moves required a grip working alongside Smokler to help guide him through direction changes. It was, as actress Penny Johnson-Gerald later put it, truly a thing of beauty to watch. Holland noted that television sets in the background offices were often not turned on because the production could not afford video playback, and that one background computer monitor was simply a paper cutout. The hallway scenes, however, looked exactly as polished and assured as anything being shot on a much larger budget. Fact 6. 2 entirely different filming formats were used per episode.
Everything's going
Good.
great.
Very glad. I'm really very glad to hear that. Really.
One of the most deliberate and carefully considered production decisions behind The Larry Sanders Show was also one of the least visible to the casual viewer. The show was built around a core idea, the difference between the version of a person that the public sees on television and the version that exists behind the scenes. To reinforce that contrast visually, the production team used 2 completely different filming formats within the same episode, every episode throughout the show's entire 6-season run. When the camera was inside the fictional talk show, showing Larry at his desk, joking with guests, doing his monologue, those sequences were shot on video using 4 cameras, presented in a way that deliberately looked like a real television broadcast. Those segments were filmed in front of a studio audience, typically once a month, to give them the genuine feeling of live television production. Everything about the image had the slightly flat, bright electronic look that television audiences associated with actual late-night talk shows. The moment the camera stepped behind the curtain and entered the offices, the dressing rooms, or the backstage hallways, the visual texture changed entirely. Those scenes were shot on film with 3 cameras running simultaneously, giving the backstage world a warmer, richer, more cinematic quality. The contrast was not accidental. It was meant to feel like 2 different realities operating side by side, with Larry existing as a different person in each one. The technique was so intentional and consistent that it took on an almost philosophical quality over time, reinforcing the show's central argument that what audiences see on television and what actually happens behind it are 2 entirely separate things, lit and framed according to entirely different rules. Fact 7. Actors shot profanity. Free duplicate takes, then refused.
This is absolutely true. A 150-year-old condom, and it was bought by a man who paid $6,300.
In the early days of The Larry Sanders Show, the production made a practical decision that, in hindsight, was always going to create problems. Because the show aired on HBO with strong language throughout, standard network and cable syndication would eventually require a cleaner version. And because nobody knew at the time how long the show would run or how widely it might eventually be distributed, the team decided to cover their bases. Up until roughly the midpoint of Season 2, after every scene that contained profanity, the actors would film a second clean take of the entire scene, substituting mild alternatives for any language that would not pass broadcast standards. The idea was reasonable on paper. If syndication ever became a possibility, the edited version would already exist and could be assembled without the awkward workarounds that other shows had to use. The problem was that this practice required roughly doubling the shooting time for any scene with strong language, which on The Larry Sanders Show was nearly every scene. The cast, which included Rip Torn and Jeffrey Tambor among others, eventually grew tired of the additional work. The clean takes were abandoned partway through the second season, and the practice never resumed. Years later, when the show did in fact air on cable networks, including IFC and Bravo, the absence of those clean takes became apparent. Editors working on the broadcast versions had to make do with whatever tools were available, cutting away, using alternate angles, sometimes leaving scenes in awkward or incomplete states. Viewers watching those edited broadcasts often noticed something slightly off about certain scenes without being able to quite identify what it was. The answer was simply that the original clean footage no longer existed, because at some point in 1993, the cast had simply had enough. Fact 8. Shandling turned down $5 million to make this show instead.
2 minutes ago, you were willing to take a puck to the nuts. Now you're crying over a couple of
I'm
bucks.
not crying over it.
Oh, you don't want to do.
By the time David Letterman announced in 1993 that he was leaving NBC's Late Night to start a new show on CBS, Gary Shandling had already established himself as one of the most promising comedic voices in American television. He had spent years as a guest host on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and he was well known within the industry as someone who understood the rhythms and the politics of late-night television better than almost anyone outside of it. NBC noticed. When Letterman's departure created a vacancy in the late-night slot, the network approached Shandling with an offer to take over Late Night. The offer was reportedly worth $5 million. For context, this was 1993, and The Larry Sanders Show had only been on the air for roughly 1 year. It was still finding its footing, now still building its audience, and still very much an experiment by HBO standards. Shandling turned the offer down. His reason, as he explained in various interviews over the years, was that he did not actually want to be a talk show host. That was precisely the point. The Larry Sanders Show was his way of examining and commenting on what talk show hosting actually was, the insecurity behind it, the ego required to sustain it, the strange relationships that formed in the environment around it. Taking the real job would have dissolved the critical distance he needed to keep writing about it honestly. He wanted to tell stories about that world, not inhabit it professionally. The decision cost him $5 million and a major network platform. It also kept one of the most acclaimed comedies of the 1990s on the air long enough to influence nearly every prestige comedy that came after it. Fact 9. A psychic on set predicted Judd Apatow would direct.
National fear that I would get the eye lines wrong, and I would cut a movie together and everyone would be looking in the
Long before Judd Apatow became one of the most commercially successful comedy filmmakers in Hollywood, he was a young writer working on The Larry Sanders Show, learning the craft of long-form television comedy under Gary Shandling. He joined the writing staff in 1993, and directing was not something he had any particular reason to expect in his near future. What nudged him toward it was, by any reasonable measure, one of the stranger origin stories in modern American comedy filmmaking. The writing staff was working on an episode that featured a psychic as a storyline element, and the production brought in an actual practicing psychic to serve as a consultant during the shoot. While on set, the psychic began offering readings to various cast and crew members in between takes. When she read for Apatow, she told him two things: that his house was going to flood and that he was about to start directing. Both predictions came true within 2 weeks. Rain flooded his house, notable enough on its own in Los Angeles, where heavy rainfall is not common. And shortly after that, Shandling approached Apatow and told him he would be directing the next episode. Apatow later recounted this story to Vanity Fair when reflecting on his career, presenting it without any particular attempt to explain it away. His first directing credit on the show came in 1998, with the episode Putting the Gay Back in Litigation, the last season of the series. That single directing credit opened a door that led to The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, and one of the defining runs in American comedy production of the 2000s, none of which, presumably, the psychic had predicted. Fact 10, David Duchovny pitched his own Crush on Larry storyline.
You get frustrated, give up on it, so I thought maybe we do a year, maybe we do half a year, maybe I just shoot the pilot.
One of the most memorable and genuinely unusual recurring storylines in the Larry Sanders Show's later seasons, in which actor David Duchovny's character appeared to develop a romantic fascination with Larry Sanders, did not originate with the writing team. It came from Duchovny himself during a basketball game. Duchovny had become a dedicated fan of the show while filming The X-Files in Vancouver, Canada. So he was so enthusiastic about it that his management team would send him VHS tapes of new episodes so he could watch them on his breaks between shoots. A writer named Maya Forbes, who worked on the show, was reportedly the person who first pushed Shandling to get Duchovny involved. After his first guest appearance in a 1995 episode called The Bump, Shandling and Duchovny hit it off well enough that Duchovny was invited to join Shandling's regular informal basketball circle, a group of close friends and colleagues who played together regularly. It was during one of those games, while the two men were sitting on the sidelines together, that Duchovny floated an idea. He wanted to come back to the show as himself, but this time with the suggestion that his character had developed a genuine crush on Larry. Shandling, who built his show on the premise that real people playing themselves could say the things that polite society normally would not allow, loved the idea immediately. The resulting episode from Season 5, called Everybody Loves Larry, is frequently cited as one of the best episodes in the entire series. The joke extended far beyond Larry Sanders, resurfacing later in an episode of The X-Files that Duchovny wrote and directed, in which a character observes that Gary Shandling seems rather fond of the Mulder character. Fact 11. Linda Doucette's real Playboy shoot mirrored her character's storyline.
That bad, Artie said when we got out of the meeting, "Hey, I swear I killed that woman in Korea."
The relationship between the fictional events on The Larry Sanders Show and the real lives of its cast was never more directly blurred than during the making of the Season 2 episode Broadcast Nudes. The episode focused on Darlene, a Hank Kingsley's assistant played by Linda Doucette, being approached to pose for Playboy magazine, an offer that caused various tensions within the fictional talk show's backstage world. The storyline was not invented. It was written specifically around something that was genuinely happening to Doucette at the time. Doucette had been approached by Playboy to pose for their September 1993 issue, and when she told Shandling about it, the two of them decided to build the episode around the real-life situation. The magazine's release date and the episode's air date were lined up to coincide as closely as possible. In terms of the real-world shoot, Doucette later recalled that the production team used Shandling's Malibu beach house as a location and that some of the poses were fairly provocative. After seeing Shandling's reaction to a few of them, she asked the photographer to pull back on the more revealing shots. She later described posing for the magazine as a bad career move, made with the best intentions but without fully thinking through the consequences. The episode itself, meanwhile, used none of the actual photographs from the real shoot and handled the storyline in the show's typically layered, character-driven way. What made the whole situation genuinely strange was how naturally the real event and the scripted one had merged together. Doucette was living her character's storyline at the exact moment the character was living it on screen, with a production schedule carefully arranged to ensure that both unfolded for the public at the same time. Fact 12, Doucette's phones were allegedly wiretapped after she was fired.
They are cleaning house. No one is safe.
What?
Fool me, agents.
The circumstances surrounding Linda Doucette's departure from The Larry Sanders Show after season 3 were painful enough on their own. Doucette and Gary Shandling had been in a real romantic relationship during her time on the show, and when that relationship ended, Shandling also ended her employment on the series. She subsequently filed a lawsuit against both Shandling and producer Brad Gray, claiming wrongful termination, and the case was eventually settled out of court for $1 million. But the story did not end with the settlement. Years later, Doucette gave interviews in which she described being contacted by the FBI and told that her phones had been tapped. The person behind the wiretapping, according to what she was told, was Anthony Pellicano. He's a private investigator and self-described Hollywood fixer who worked extensively in the entertainment industry during the 1980s and 90s, frequently hired by powerful figures to gather information on people who posed legal or professional problems for them. Pellicano was eventually convicted in federal court in 2008 on a range of charges, including racketeering, wiretapping, and identity theft. His conviction became one of the most significant Hollywood scandals of the era, touching multiple high-profile figures across the entertainment industry. Doucette was not the only person who claimed to have been surveilled by Pellicano on behalf of industry clients. For Doucette, the discovery added another deeply troubling dimension to an already difficult period. She had been fired from a job she had held for 3 seasons. She had gone through a painful personal breakup, and she had apparently also been the target of illegal surveillance. The settlement money closed the legal chapter, but the details that emerged long afterward made the full story considerably darker than a simple workplace dispute. Fact 13, the firing of Doucette, became art imitating life. Imitating art.
For a standard mail, and the old Elvis stamp for packages over 300 pounds.
The Larry Sanders Show was always built on the idea that the line between fiction and reality was thinner than anyone liked to admit. Nowhere in the show's history was that idea demonstrated more uncomfortably than in the storyline and real-life events surrounding Linda Doucette and Gary Shandling. During the show's run, the writers developed a storyline in which Larry Sanders became romantically involved with Darlene. I'm Hank's assistant and a character Doucette had been playing since the pilot. The storyline explored how that kind of involvement between a boss and an employee creates complications and tensions throughout a workplace. It was, as TV tropes and various television historians have noted, a case of art imitating life, because at the exact time those episodes were being written and filmed, Shandling and Doucette were in a genuine romantic relationship in real life. The show was dramatizing something that was actually happening between 2 of its own people. That alone was unusual. What made it truly strange was what came next. When the real relationship between Shandling and Doucette ended at the close of season 3, Shandling also removed Doucette from the cast. Darlene simply stopped appearing in the show. In the fictional world, the aftermath of the Larry and Darlene storyline had already played out. In the real world, a lawsuit followed, and the case settled for $1 million. The pattern, art imitating life, then life imitating the art that had imitated it, was almost too perfectly constructed to have been accidental, except that it was entirely accidental, the result of 2 people navigating a real relationship while also performing a fictional version of it on camera. The layers of mirror and reflection were so complete that it is genuinely difficult, looking back, to identify where one reality ended and the other began. Fact 14. Seinfeld actors did cameos because both shows shared a lot.
Larry, do you really think you're getting the respect that you deserve? Huh?
Come on.
Answer me, Larry.
All right, look, we'll play it out.
On one of the small but interesting production footnotes of The Larry Sanders Show involves a geographical coincidence that helped contribute to one of the most distinctive aspects of the series. the parade of recognizable celebrity faces appearing in small roles alongside the regular cast. Both The Larry Sanders Show and Seinfeld, two of the most critically regarded television comedies of the 1990s, were shot at the same production facility in Studio City, California. The two shows were, in a sense, neighbors. Cast members and crew from each production would regularly encounter one another in shared spaces, in hallways, in the parking lot, during breaks. That proximity made it natural and logistically easy for actors from one show to walk across and appear on the other. When Seinfeld cast members did cameos on The Larry Sanders Show, there was no need for elaborate scheduling or travel arrangements. They were already there. The same was true in reverse. Larry Sanders, of course, was built around the idea of real celebrities appearing as heightened or satirical versions of themselves, which gave those cameo appearances a slightly different weight than they would have had on a more conventional comedy. But the availability of the Seinfeld cast at the same physical location meant the two productions had an unusually organic connection to each other during the years their runs overlapped. It is worth noting the historical irony here. Seinfeld aired on NBC, while The Larry Sanders Show was on HBO. In the 1990s, those two platforms represented very different ideas about what television comedy could be. The fact that the casts of both shows were shooting their work at the same physical address in Southern California, occasionally wandering into each other's productions, was a small but vivid illustration of just how concentrated the world of American television comedy actually was at its peak in that decade. Fact 15. It was the first cable series ever nominated for a Comedy Emmy.
Yes?
Oh, boy, where'd you get this done, Hank?
Well,
you know, was it in a sterile environment? Look that way.
When the Primetime Emmy Awards first nominated The Larry Sanders Show for Outstanding Comedy Series, the significance of that moment extended well beyond the show itself. The Larry Sanders Show was the first cable series in television history to receive a nomination in that category. Up until that point, the Emmy Awards in the comedy category had been the exclusive domain of broadcast network television. The idea that a cable channel could produce work at that level had simply not been formally acknowledged by the industry's most prominent awards body. The nomination was a turning point, both symbolically and practically. It marked the moment when the broader television industry was forced to admit, officially and publicly, that the quality of what was happening on cable could no longer be ignored. The Larry Sanders Show had already been receiving widespread critical praise since its debut in August of 1992. But critical praise and industry recognition are two different things. The Emmy nomination placed the show inside the same formal conversation as the broadcast sitcoms that had historically defined what American comedy television was supposed to look like. The ripple effects were substantial. HBO's confidence in producing original comedy and drama continued to grow following the show's success, eventually leading to shows like The Sopranos, Sex and the City, and Curb Your Enthusiasm, which itself was created by Larry David, who had been a writer and producer on Seinfeld during the same years that Larry Sanders was running next door at the Studio City facility. The door that The Larry Sanders Show opened at the Emmy Awards was one that cable and streaming television has been walking through ever since, to the point where it is now entirely unremarkable for streaming services and cable networks to dominate the major comedy categories every single year.